today we're talking about goals. It's such an important topic, and I'm so glad that JuJuan emailed me last week. He's like, we're going to talk about goals this week because it's important, especially now as we're, I want to say we're hitting the end of not necessarily the end of this pandemic or whatnot, but we've definitely hit a stride in the sense of, all right, it's time you need to start thinking a little bit more critically about the future, what you're going to do, as opposed to just kind of living in this moment right now.
I'd agree. The thing is, this pandemic, look, it's not underestimate the toll it's taking, right? We know it's taken lives. And for a lot of individuals, it's eviscerated their livelihoods, right? But there's another side to the pandemic, right? It provided also an opportunity for individuals who seized it to kind of cut the fat, right? This pandemic really forced you to slim down in a lot of respects, right? To really take time to evaluate whether or not your habits, whether or not your modus operandi, whether or not your business practices were really effective, right? Before the pandemic, you could have been okay with certain decision-making processes and habits and behaviors. And I mean, quite frankly, you could have jacked off a lot of time and resources, right? Or been operating in such a way where you weren't being intentional. You could have got away with that. I mean, but what this pandemic has done is it's forced a lot of individuals really to sit down and take a good, hard look and evaluate not only the people around them, not only the circumstances that may be coloring their lives, but also take time to evaluate internally what's going on inside. What's really important to me? What matters most? What do I really want to be doing with my life? And, I would hope that for many of us, particularly for those of us who are entrepreneurs, right? That you did take the time to do that. And look, it's not too late. It's never too late, right?
Right.
And we're about to jump into that now. The goal setting process, when you think about it, I think one of the most difficult, one of the reasons why people have such difficulties with it is they think it's an event. When the reality matters, goal setting is not an event. It's not something you do one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. It's something that's an ongoing daily process, right? And so, I concur with Rahele. I really do hope individuals did take the time to kind of do some of that self-reflection during this period.
Yeah, because, we'll get into the thick of it here and of like the importance of goal setting and how you can do that and things like that. But if you've already set goals and if you've already, maybe put some of this into practice a little bit, you may need to rethink these goals, right? You may need to pivot and shift. And I hope at least people can take away from this chat that if you're feeling like you need to do that or adjust that, or maybe rethink some of the things that you've set as goals, that this will help you be more mindful about what realistic goals you can be setting for yourself for the future. Yeah. So let's dive into it. Yeah. Why is goal setting so important, especially for entrepreneurs? I'll let you go.
Yeah. So I believe, matter of fact, I don't think it's important. I would argue that it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's not important. It's necessary. If you're going to live a life of satisfaction. And if you study the epetymology of the word satisfaction, you have satis and you have action. And satis is a Latin, or I can't remember if it's Latin or Greco-Roman, but I know the first part of it means enough, right? To have a life of satisfaction means to take enough action, right? So you have to be taking action. But there is a such thing as climbing the ladder, and you're climbing the ladder up the wrong building, right? And part of the goal setting process is making sure you identify the building you want to be crawling, the ladder you want to be scaling, the mountain you want to be climbing. Because you get to the top, you might not like what you see, right? And I mean, there are so many different studies. And so, I mean, we can go on and on. We're not going to bore you to death with this, but, I was thinking about a study that's oftentimes cited, and it's a 1979 Harvard MBA study where they study graduating classes, right? And I think most people heard this, but I think it just illustrates importance so clearly about the importance of goal setting. And they took inventory of their graduating classes. And what they found after a number of years is that 84% of this graduating selection of classes they took a look at over a period of time had no goals, right? They graduated happy, yay, I'm about to go out here in the world, make a living for myself, find, an occupation or something to do with myself to be productive, and things are going to work out, right? I would argue that's most of us post-graduation, college or high school. That's most individuals. You have 13% of individuals who actually had taken the time to write down their goals. So they wrote down the things they wanted. They wrote down the life they wanted to curate for themselves 5, 10 years down the line, which is already a separator, right? You separate yourself from really 90% of people when you've actually taken the time to do that. Most individuals, if you were to ask them, show me your journal, show me your where you put any type of entry in terms of the things that you want for yourself, whether it be a notebook or if you're doing it electronically online using Google Docs, whatever the case may be. If you were to ask me, hey, if your life depended on it, could you show me within 2 minutes what your written goals are? Most people couldn't produce those things, right? They couldn't do it. And we're gonna come back to why that's so important. And then you had 3% that not only had written down their goals, but they had definite plans, meaning they wrote their goals down and they reverse engineered them, right?
Yeah.
By month, year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, et cetera, right? This is what they did. And they found that the 13%, if you will, that wrote down the goals, that they earned more than the 84% together. And then they found that 3% of that graduating class actually earned 10 times more than the entire graduating class.
Yeah.
And empirically, if that doesn't at least turn on the light bulb, right? You just got to ask yourself, right? And here's the thing: it would be different if that was an anomaly, but it's something that you find time and time again when these studies come out, right? About the importance of goal setting. When I think about it, there's a friend of mine that shall remain nameless that I have a lot of love for, appreciation for. I remember years ago having a conversation with her, and it was someone whom I highly respect, crushed it academically, was a phenomenal, conscientious activist in her own right. Went on medical school. I don't need to say much more. Crushed medical school. Went on to found programs and curriculums and help build hospitals internationally. It's just a powerhouse. And I remember having a conversation with her several years ago where she called me up one day and we're talking and she said, I'm not happy. And this is someone whom, lives in condos in some very expensive cities, put it that way,
Yeah.
right? She's a quote unquote achieved the dream, right? She's making an impact in the world, never mind the community, she's making an impact in the world. She's got all the certificates, degrees, and all the accoutrements that you would anticipate, right? In terms of success and all the cachet that comes with it, right? Monetarily doing pretty well for herself, right? I remember visiting with her a period of time, sitting in one of the condos, looking out and seeing the landscape and realizing she was paying about $60,000 a month.
Oh my God.
So she's doing pretty well for herself.
Yeah.
She called me up and she says, I'm unhappy. Mm-hmm. And she said, and of course I asked why. And she said, I felt like I've just been going from thing to thing. I've just been doing one thing after another because I'm supposed to. Because this is the path that you're supposed to be on, to be happy. And she said she was like, it was almost grotesque how she described her life. Now, the average Joe looking in would have thought everything was right as rain, right? But on the inside, she was unhappy, unfulfilled. And really, when you look at her quote unquote accomplishments, she didn't even feel like they were accomplishments. They were just things that she did.
Yeah.
And I would hope that there's some saliency to this. This is resonating with those who are listening, right? about why goal setting is important too, right? And why this process is so necessary.
Yeah. If you are moving at a pace of operating instead of, just day to day, without having, I don't want to say an end goal or an end game, or, there's like, because I feel like your goals need to keep evolving and shifting. I mean, how many times I we've seen it play out in like movies and TV. They make movies and TV shows about how like, oh, this person gets everything they want and then they're not happy, right? Or just even the phrase of like, money can't buy you happiness. Well, money makes it sure of a hell of a lot easier, but but that phrase is true, because if you don't have these active other reasons, then it's just not going to matter. But
Yeah. And, I understand why it's difficult for individuals to initiate the goal setting process, right? I get it, right? You have so many individuals, New Year's resolutions are like a perfect example, right? I've noticed more and more and more people have gotten away from New Year's resolutions.
Yeah.
Because they'll set the resolutions and 3 months in, they are going to go to the gym, and 3 months in, they say the gym doesn't work. Well, it wasn't the gym didn't work. You didn't go to the gym. You didn't work, right?
Yeah.
They set these goals monetarily. People set goals in terms of their families. And then you look up 3-4 months into it, and oftentimes, because certain pieces weren't in place, you don't accomplish the goal. And so people assume goal setting doesn't work, right? It's not imperative. It's not necessary. And I would submit that the biggest challenge as it relates to goal setting is that it's skilled trade. And most people don't realize that goal setting is skilled trade. There's a science, there's a methodology behind it. No different than becoming a doctor, no different than becoming a high performance executive or athlete, right? There's a process behind it. People aren't born at the womb running at track speed like Usain Bolt. You don't become the Williams sisters after you just step on the tennis court one time, right? There's a process. And unless you have been born into a family unit or an environment where it's being executed, where you kind of almost pull it in like osmosis, so you get to see that process up close, which is obviously, that's 90% of the U.S. population doesn't get to see that.
Right.
It's not being taught in schools, which is kind of interesting, right? You think about it, it's one of the most important, if not the most important life skill that you can adopt. But it's not taught, right? It's not taught in high school. It's not taught in college. Not unless you have actually made a decision to make that part of your curriculum. But I remember when I was attending college years ago, that wasn't even on the curriculum. Goal setting, organizational development and goal setting, right? That type of stuff was non-existent. And so that's also the reason why individuals have challenges, because they haven't seen the methodology. And we don't really understand the science behind it, because there is a science behind goal setting. There's a really interesting talk online. Mel Robbins talks about this a lot, the reticular activating system, right? And we're not going to do a deep dive into science right now. That will take another 40 minutes. But the basic gist of it is the way your mind works is it's filtering all the time, right? So it's that phenomena, right, where I think we've all been in a situation where there was a car that we wanted, and you start thinking about the vehicle, and then all of a sudden it starts to appear more frequently on the road, right? It wasn't like there are more of that particular vehicle being bought or purchased because you thinking about it is top of mind. Your mind is filtering, and it starts searching for those things, right? Kind of like the thing that you think about is what you bring about. That's how your reticular activating system works. So a person wakes up in the morning and they're on this is going to be a suck day. I suck, you suck, everybody sucks. Your brain is going to find evidence to confirm that.
Yes.
Right? If you wake up in the morning thinking it's going to be a wonderful day, people are going to roll out the red carpet for me when I wake up. I'm going to achieve A, B, C, and D, and people want me to achieve it, and I want to achieve it, and this is who I am. This is me. You're going to find confirmation, right? And that's how that particular activating system works. The things you think about, the things that you reflect on, the things that are most important to you, that are most salient, that are most prominent in the front of that brain of yours, your mind finds evidence and reason to believe. And that's part of the reason why the goal setting process is so important. Because look, when we both woke up in the morning, there was an agenda waiting for us, right? There was the world's agenda,
Yeah.
and then there was our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And the question becomes, which agenda was most prominent on your mind? Was it your bill collectors? Was it the people that you don't like? Was it the people that you quote unquote work for? Was it the news? Was it social media? You know, are you waking up and other people's thoughts, actions, behaviors, their agenda for you, the things they want you to invest your time in? Is that what's most prominent on your mind? Or did you wake up today with an already set agenda, already set serviceable goals, right? That were generated internally based on things that you want.
Yeah. Goal setting, even in the short, just like your daily goals, right? I just to kind of give another point to that, especially with everything that's happening right now. The work I do is mostly remote anyway. I'm working from home most days anyway, and this shouldn't have affected how I went about my day, but it did, because the world shifted and my husband's home now all the time. And it's like, it shifted. Right. So for whatever reason, the process that I had already set in place to make sure I stayed focused in my day, the things that I wanted to accomplish were top of mind, just were not working. It was just not happening. I got way off track. And then I got disgusted with myself, and I was like, all right, I need to make a new list. And I literally did that. I made like a task list for myself. It's very simple things throughout the day that I make sure I get to. You know, it's not like this rigid, like, crazy process, but even that small step of doing that has helped significantly. But it's also helped significantly because it allows me to then look at that list at the end of the day. What have I done? What have I not? And to a certain extent, collect data on myself, because goal setting is hard. It is hard to look at yourself, and it's not, we are usually our own worst critic, right? But it's hard to look at your shortcomings more critically and analytically to be like, how do I move through this so that I can achieve my actual goals? Because you can't just set these goals and then believe you have all the tools to accomplish it. Goal setting, adjust your brain. You have to work really hard. You're trying to become your best self. Well, if you were your best self right now, you wouldn't have these goals, right? So it's super hard to do that, but by taking super tiny baby steps, even to, because I think the first step of doing that can be really hard. The first step of doing anything can be really hard, and putting that into practice. But as simple as waking up and making sure that your mind is right when you wake up, if that's the one thing you do every day for the next month, just to set that consistency step, my gosh, your goals are going to be so much easier to achieve.
Yes. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. It's a habit, right? It's a habit. And anything that you habitually do, you eventually get better at.
Yeah.
Right? When you first start the goal setting process, and if you haven't done it consistently, it's like a new exercise regimen, right? Your muscles are going to be sore, and they're going to continue to be sore until you make that transition from them no longer being sore, right? Goal setting is no different for most of us, including, majority of the very successful individuals whom I know of. I'll admit for myself personally, it still can feel like a chore, right? At times, but it's one of those things where, while the exercise itself may feel like a chore, you feel good about the results.
Yeah.
Right? When you're doing the push-ups and the squats, and you're doing the leg lifts and whatever else you're doing, it's not always fun.
Right.
when you're going through the process, but
Yeah.
you like the results, the energy, right? The confidence that it builds, right? The goal setting process is very similar, right? Those little things that you just mentioned, even if it's just a little goal, achieving it builds confidence, it builds momentum, and snowflakes turn into snowballs. You start knocking out small goals, and then very soon, the larger goals become easier because you've built the habit and you've built the confidence, you've built the positive expectation, right? You said something else that caught my attention too, in terms of difficulty. I think one of the things that are most difficult about goals um, is when you set goals, if you're doing it properly, goals should be a reflection of your values. And that's really where the hard work is,
Yeah.
right? It's really taking the time to identify what you actually value. And that's tough
Mhm.
because you have family that will influence you. You have friends that will influence you for better or for worse. You have whatever media you've been consuming that will influence you, right? Once again, your brain doesn't decipher right or wrong. It's like a computer. Whatever you program it to do, it's going to do. Whatever you program it to think, it's going to think. So if you're listening to BS.com every single day, if you're listening to things that don't really serve you, it doesn't matter the goals that you write down on paper. You're programming your brain to do something different, right? Um, what you really need to be doing is asking yourself, what are the things that you value? What are the things that are most important to you? What are the things that give you energy, that make you happy? What are the things that you feel good about? Not what people want you to feel good about, not what society expects you to feel good about, not what your environment dictates to you, but you have to do the hard work of asking yourself in a vacuum, lights off, noise off, the volume off. What is it that matters most to me? Because here's the thing, you can't put your life's energies behind a compromise. You can't get amped. You can't get excited. You can't get enthusiastic about the things that you're doing if your values aren't aligned with it, right? The things that are important to you, your self-concept. If those things aren't aligned, goal setting won't work. And that's one of the biggest challenges that you're going to have. You know, there's a gentleman that I think about from time to time because his book influenced me quite a bit when I was a youth. And that was Malcolm X's autobiography. And in his autobiography, the one thing I pulled out the autobiography, I know it's probably different from what other people pulled out of it, but what I pulled out of it is just because you find a cat in the oven, it doesn't make it a biscuit. Right? He says that just because you find a cat in the oven, it doesn't make you a biscuit. In other words, your environment, the things that are happening around you don't necessarily define you.
Mhm.
Your values define you. The person you want to become defines you. That higher vision that you referenced earlier, those should be the things that are defining you.
Yeah.
And if you're defining your values, then you should be defining your roles, right? So how those values find expression, right? If entrepreneurship is a value, I mean, freedom, flexibility, we know what it is to be an entrepreneur. We know what we're really looking for, right? At our core, those who are really true, purebred entrepreneurs, right? The one thing we all have in common is we don't like authority, right? We are especially lame authority,
Right.
right? Authority for authority's sake,
Right.
right? There's a difference between someone who's influential because they get things done and people respect them versus someone who has authority over you because of title, right?
Right.
Entrepreneurs hate that,
Right.
right? The latter. So we know freedom, flexibility is important to us. Usually entrepreneurs are motivated by something that's transpired. They were disgusted about something, or they saw a problem that really irked them in a really special way, right? And that's where they find the energy to address those issues. That's why they can go on tirelessly when other people fade, right? Understanding these things about yourself, even personally, right? What are your values as it relates to family? What are your values as it relates to money? What are your values as it relates to learning? Like, what are the things that are at your core, right? They say if you're not willing to stand for something, you'll fall for anything. The things that you're willing to stand for, sacrifice for, do when there's no monetary reward for it, those are your values, right? The things that you think about that you want to do when nobody's looking, when there's no judgment, there's no eyeballs, there's no one to assess, criticize, or tell you what to do. Those things that are foremost in your mind, in your body and soul. You have to start there.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself, okay, how are these values going to find expression? And then define that expression. Some people call that roles, right? So what are the roles that are most important to me? You know, for me personally, I think fatherhood, husband, entrepreneur. I have many roles in different organizations, right? They're important to me. So I play a role in my personal business. I play a role in our partnership. I play a role in several other partnerships I'm involved in. If these things aren't consistent with my values, I can't get my energy behind them. Mm-hmm. Right? So defining what your roles are. And once again, this is not something you do in one day.
Yes. Yeah.
This is not something you do in 1 week. Mm-hmm. And to be transparent with you, while your values may not change that much, your roles will. Mm-hmm. Because you're advancing in life, you're progressing, things are happening. If you're learning, if you're growing, if you're about the process of self-reflection and you're about the process of development of yourself, the goalposts, the goals are going to change a little bit over the course of time because you're going to be at different places in your life. But despite the fact that your goals may change, they still always have to be aligned with what your values are.
Yeah.
And what matters most to you, the things that give you energy.
Yeah.
And in my humble opinion, that's the work that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's definitely, yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that that's not something as easy as like, okay, I'm going to sit down this afternoon and write out all my values. You know, it's like, it's hard to, it takes time to really think through that critically. And part of that involves you just, you know, doing what you're doing a little bit to really understand what you actually value and things like that. Mm-hmm. I think that's a good first step of the goal setting process, right? Mm-hmm. That's a good first step of, if you don't have that understanding, you're really going to have a hard time getting through the rest of setting proper goals that are going to be goals that you actually want and that you can continue to put energy behind.
Yes.
Right? Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about that. Let's talk about, okay, so we've talked about the values and understanding our values and doing all that hard soul searching with those values. But mm-hmm. if you have that and you're there, right, and you understand those things, what's now going to be your next step with goal setting process? What does that look like?
So the reason why I love this topic is, and look, I don't put myself out there as don't get it twisted, people. I'm not a life coach guru.
Right.
I do, okay? I learn things. I do things. I evaluate the things that I do. I see where I effed up. And then I see where there was progress and I share those things, right? So let me put that out there, that disclaimer. Because when I think about, this is really personal to me because the goal setting process, I think is the thing that has changed my life and put me on my current trajectory. Because I was that dude that did some of everything, right? I was constantly doing stuff. And I was oftentimes, and so I can lay out a string of achievements, things that I've accomplished over my life, right? But because they weren't really aligned, I never really took the time to plot ahead and think about critically whether or not the things that I was doing then and also the direction I was headed was aligned with my values. I never got traction, right? And, you know, it is what it is. Everyone's journey is going to be different, right? I didn't grow up in an environment. And so I'm speaking to the audience. If you're listening to this, if you didn't grow up in an environment where these things were taught, where you could mirror, if you didn't grow up in an environment, or if you're currently not in an environment where people will be supportive of this process and help facilitate and edify you along this process, I'm telling you, you can do it. Because that's my story in many respects. So after you define your values and your roles, now it's time to curate the vision.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's time to curate the narrative. You know, one of my business mentors, and I've heard this time and time again, the most important story that you'll ever hear in life is the story you tell yourself about yourself. So
Yeah.
what story did you tell yourself about yourself when you first opened your eyes? What story did you tell yourself 2 hours later? What story did you tell yourself now? What story are you going to tell yourself at 12? What story are you going to tell yourself at 2, 4, 6, 10, until you close your eyes again, right? That is the most important thing, curating that vision and curating that story that you tell yourself about yourself. Because once again, that brain, right? It's paying attention to your self-talk. It's paying attention to the story and it's going to find, right? It's going to seek it out. If you have a wonderful narrative about who you are and what you're becoming based on your values and your roles, the things that matter most to you, you're going to seek out those relationships. You're also, once again, the brain doesn't calculate fear and stuff like that, right? It doesn't work that way. Our bodies do, but the brain is like, look, I'm programmed to do this. I'm going to find this. So even the anxieties and fears, the things that may be holding you back because you're scared. Look, if you're programming your brain 24/7 with a narrative of tenacity, with a narrative of overcoming challenges, with I will do, right? No excuses type attitude, right? If that's the programming, you'll find a way. You'll find the relationships, you'll overcome the circumstances, you'll eat your fear like Skittles, right? When you're programming yourself correctly. So part of that next step is to begin to draft a narrative, right? Because here's the thing, you're not going to have time every single day to draw out your values. You're not, right? Because it's a process and it's a long process. You're not going to have time in the morning to do that. You may not. You may not have time to write down your short term and your intermediate and your long-term goals. But you do have time to look at your affirmation statements. You do have time to look at your story, the narrative that you tell yourself. And that's the most important part at the end of the day. If you don't have that narrative going on, you can write down the best goals in the world. Once again, they can be great, they can be grandiose, they can be fantastic, but they have to align with the narrative that you tell yourself, right? And you want to think about the goal setting, and really now we're moving into the goal execution, because that's the other piece is missing. Mm-hmm. People set the goals, but then there's no game plan in terms of how to execute those goals, right? So now we're talking about the execution piece. And I'm going to throw out a couple books that have made the biggest difference in my life and that I've seen make the biggest difference in other people's lives, and I've recommended it, right? So John C. Maxwell's Today Matters. Anyone who knows me, if you start talking to me about books, that's going to come out my mouth first, right? All day, every day. Jack Canfield's Success Principles, another phenomenal book. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? Gold standard. Covey, the Covey series. Cynthia Kersey's Unstoppable. Tim Ferriss, Tools of Titans, right? I love these books because they showcase everyday people. They showcase, because you got a lot of people who are into public speaking. Yeah. And that's okay. I'm not, look, everyone has a role and a purpose, right? But what I like about these books is they showcase people who've done the work. Mm-hmm. And you can read their stories and see their transformation and see how the goal setting, not just setting goals, but goal execution has kind of changed their lives. And that's what I love about those books that I just recommended, right? These are people who studied it, but also applied these goals. And you can literally, if you study the individuals who are either authors of these books, or if you study the individuals who are being written about these books, you can see the trajectory of their careers based on their ability to do these things. So not only is it someone necessarily talking to you, but it's instructional. It's stuff that you can pull out and apply yourself, which is why I really like those books, right? Because we're all about actionable content here at Next Opportunity Social.
Yes. Yeah. I know, like for me, I tend to be drawn to it, whether it's supposed to be a helpful self-help or goal setting or helping with marketing or things like that book. I'm always drawn to the individual who's written that book, or the reason why they wrote that book. You know, that to me, there are so many books that you can take away, sometimes not even the original point of that book, but just from learning from and embracing people that you admire in that capacity, or, you know, have been through their own adversity, that you can learn from. I tend to read a lot more from bloggers, newsletters. So for me, that's part of my morning thing of where are the leaders who are showing up every day to give me a little bit of tidbit of wisdom that I can set my mind right. You know, when I think of, especially in the marketing world, Seth Godin and stuff, he writes his blog every day and he shows up whether we want him to or not. Another one that I really love, his newsletter, is Mark Manson, or I think it's Manson, who wrote the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, right? Or the Everything, a book about
to write
hope.
that down. I need to.
Yeah, the other good one is that his book about hope, which is Everything's Fucked. He's like a very modern day philosopher, as someone who's studied a lot of philosophy and philosophers, and how do we apply those lessons now. I think of another person, Ryan Holiday, who was a skeevy marketer back in his heyday. Like, he did a lot of really gross marketing things that would make you super angry if you knew about it. And then he wrote a bunch of books about it so that you can, you know, see through all that. But he has transitioned into, like, one of his that is the Daily Stoic. It's just a quick journal thing that you can journal on and reflect on. And it's interesting to watch. I tend to be interested in reading, especially books about people who sometimes reached their goals and got to these goals and achieved everything and realized that all this sucked, you know, and then how did they move through that, right? Because I certainly, it puts things in perspective a little bit sometimes of like, well, he achieved all the goals that I'm trying to achieve, and that really sucked for him, you know? So it's like, what can I take away and learn from that wouldn't put me on that same path necessarily, but.
Yeah. So I think this is where people get it twisted, right? Once again, it goes back to values, your roles, and your narrative. I think about goals as almost like milestones. They're like course corrections. The goal is not the aim. The aim is who you're becoming and the things that you're doing that bring you satisfaction, right? Which should be predicated upon your values and your roles, the things that are important to you. That way you're doing things that bring you happiness, that bring you fulfillment, right? And that's the filter you should be using when you're writing down your goals. So a plane, or some people use a rocket as an example, right? A rocket takes flight, it has a destination. And what we know from planes and rockets, once they get into the sky, turbulence, things start happening. For human beings, turbulence is called life. Life happens, right? So there's going to be turbulence, and that turbulence is going to kind of throw you off path, right? And people are turbulence too. That's very important. You need to understand this. People can be turbulence
Yeah.
because if you're becoming something different than what people anticipate or what they know you as, you're now making other people uncomfortable because you're not fitting into that box. You're not fitting into that ideal. You're not fitting into that persona that they expected you to be, right? One of the easy examples, I hate to say it because it's still so, I mean, it just happens, right? People here in Detroit, I hear it all the time, right? Particularly among creative artists, right? That they have to leave, get their shine, and then come back. Now, when that artist leaves Detroit, they're not oftentimes doing different things. They're not, they don't switch up. They just go elsewhere and do them. And people accept them for them. They don't have any preconceived notions or ideals of who they should be. They go there, they put their work down. People respect and admire the value they bring to the marketplace, right? Regardless of what endeavor you're involved in. And then they come back to Detroit, now they have this shine. And it's because the people around them couldn't see them that way or refused to, didn't desire to do so. And so, because you're messing with people, once again, their comfort zone, right? People don't like to feel uncomfortable. They like to kind of know and be able to predict and anticipate, right? So know that people can be turbulence. So there's turbulence on that airplane flight. There's turbulence when that rocket breaks out into the atmosphere. And then depending on how far off the destination is, you're going to be off track a lot of times, right? I've heard it said that a rocket moving into outer space, same thing with planes, when they get in the sky and start heading to a destination, they're off course over 90% of the time. But they're getting these signals from HQ. And the signals are helping them readjust their course. The signals are making sure they reach their destination. The signals are making sure that they stay the path despite all the turbulence and life happenings, death, disability, pandemics, breakups, relationship falling apart, all this wonderful stuff that's part of the human experience, right? This turbulence happens, but your goal setting process is the process in which you self-direct, you self-correct, right? And if you think about the goal setting process like that, you should never reach a point where you achieve a goal and you're like, dad, this sucked. Because ideally your goals should be a reflection of the things that you said the things that you really want anyway.
Yeah.
Right? The things that you really want. You know, people spend so much time trying to appease others and trying to be palpable and acceptable to others, right? But if you think about, and I'm speaking to the entrepreneurs in particular, if you think about the entrepreneurs that we respect the most, those individuals who achieved, who've gotten after and distinguished themselves, if they spent their time concerning themselves with what other people think, if they let other people determine their internal compass, we would know about them. I remember what Oprah looked like when I was a kid. I remember vividly, right? I remember in an African-American community, we called her Purple Oprah, right? No one's calling Oprah Purple Oprah anymore, right? When you think about Steve Jobs, he's a little idiosyncratic. People made fun of Gates, right? People made fun of Gates, awkward person, right? There are early pictures of, that's terrible, man. My brain just quit. Messing with kids will do this to you. The founder of Amazon, right?
Jeff
just
Bezos.
read about him this morning. Jeff Bezos. Yeah. Have you seen early pictures of Jeff Bezos?
Yeah, yeah. He don't look like he does now.
Oh,
yeah.
Snap.
Yeah.
Woo! Motivation, right? If these individuals took the path that people anticipate, Jackie Robinson, I mean, you all across endeavors, business, athletics, music, you name it, right? If individuals spent their time concerning themselves about what other people thought of them and expected them, we would not know their names. There are no overnight success stories. It's just people that you hear about overnight.
Correct.
And these individuals, absent the limelight, values, roles, goals, unbridled enthusiasm, belief, and faith, right? And that's how we end up hearing about them. And that's, I don't want to be redundant, but I feel like it's so necessary, because this is the piece that really messes people up. You're setting goals predicated upon what other people's expectations are of you. You're setting goals to be salient to other, or to be acceptable to other people around you. And you can't be on 10 about other people's goals.
Mm-hmm.
You can't you're not going to find it in you, those things that give you resonance and energy. And once again, your goals are going to change accordingly. So another piece that's part of that, right, that I just kind of touched on, you got to have coaches. You have to have goal getters. You got to have a circle around you, right? Michael Jordan, Phil Jackson, the Williams sisters, their father. Can't remember his name right now off the top of my head. I did a post, I think a week ago, where I talked about how fortunate and blessed I felt to meet Michael Jackson's voice coach, right? Michael Jackson, one of the greatest entertainers in the world, had a coach.
Oh, of course.
It's called a clue. Yeah, it's called a clue, right? We all need those coaches, those people. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a coach in a conventional sense, but just people who will hold us accountable,
mm-hmm.
right? Where we share our values, we share our roles, our goals, things that matter most. You got to have people around you who love you, accept you, and want to see you win. That's so important. They want to see you become your best self. And make sure those people are around you. That's the other reason why people fail in their goals. They set their goals and they keep it to themselves. They keep the goals to themselves. And there's something to say about being strategic, right, in terms of your business dealings, because entrepreneurship is competition, right? And in many respects, it is competition, is what it is. Can't get around that. But you have to have a circle of people around you to help you with that process. Else you're not going to achieve. You're just not going to get there, because you need the reinforcement.
Yeah, that's something that gets forgotten about significantly, especially with newer entrepreneurs, is that you have this idea of like, I'm doing this for myself, I need to do it on my own. And it's like, but you're not going to be able to point to anyone who's successful who did it on their own in some capacity of that. And at the very least, if it's someone to hold you accountable, someone that can be your cheerleader, someone that's, you can't, if you're at a point where you're trying to do it alone, if you stop doing that and you start bringing the right people in to help you, it's unbelievable how quickly your success can take off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once again, I'm going to speak from my own personal experience, growing up in the environments I grew up in. You may be listening to this and you may not be surrounded by those people,
mm-hmm.
the right people. Those people might not be in your reach. They might not be, right? And once again, you might have the wrong people who are not edifying you, but they're taking from you. They're siphoning your energy. There's something called books. There's something called audios, podcasts. I'm not a huge fan of utilizing YouTube frequently this way, because you pull up a YouTube video and then all the junk comes up on the side, which is a distraction, right? For me, something that I do religiously when I first wake up in the morning, I'm done going through my process, is I find a good podcast, I find a good book, I find something that will pour positive energy into me. Because if you don't have the people around you, the people are around you, you just have to engage them differently, right?
Yeah.
Some of the most successful business owners in the world are dead and gone. I call them my best confidants and friends, because I'm reading their books. I'm listening to their words, right? I'm reading their work. And so they're still counseling me and motivating me to this day, despite the fact they're long gone and dead. So I'll find historical figures who may not have done exactly what I'm doing, but they've achieved some things that are in alignment with what I want to do, right? And study those individuals, right? That's part of the execution process of goal setting, right? This is how you execute. So you have your values, you have your roles, you've written your narrative. Now you have to execute, right? And that's part of that execution process. It's something that I'll continually keep repeating to again. There's a movie called Lord of War. It was Nicolas Cage, right? He's his character, Yuri, and I forgot the last name. But anyway, he's character in Lord of War. And towards the end of it, you know, he's lost his family. He's lost, I don't know, any type of quote unquote moral standing or whatever. And at the end of the movie, you know, the question is kind of asked subtly, and he answers it explicitly. And the question is, why do you continue to do this? And he says, because I'm good at it. I'm good at it. That's why. This is one thing that he was good at. It's one thing that he could do, that he accomplished, that he could acquire the things he wanted to acquire. It was a thing that he's good at. Now, I'm not advocating you become good at things that are self-destructive and destructive to humanity around you. But what I am advocating is, look, the reason why the goal setting this process is important, and why I know it's so salient to entrepreneurs, is because that's a piece of it, right? Your values, your roles, the things that you choose to do that you're good at, you can't be ashamed at it. Go hard at it, right? Go hard at it. I want to pay top dollar for mediocre burgers. People do not want to pay $50 for White Castle burger. So if you know you're White Castle at something, but you're only doing it because everybody expects you to do it, one or two things are going to happen. You're either not going to find the quote unquote success and feeling the satisfaction you desire, or you're not going to be rewarded, because society doesn't reward mediocrity, right? You have to do the things that give you energy, because you have energy, you'll learn what you need to learn, you'll do what you'll need to do, you'll sacrifice what you need to sacrifice to get really good and become elite at something. Mm-hmm. And that's why the goal setting process is so important, and being in touch with who you are and what you're good at is so important too. Don't pay attention to the context clues, which are also cues, right? Pay attention. Someone says you're good at something, take some time to reflect on that. Yeah. If you know that you're doing business one way, or you have one modus operandi for one business model, but you start to notice that on the other side, there's something else that's working a little bit better, and it's giving you energy and you're getting the results that you want, don't resist that, right? So do the things that you're good at. Don't let people dissuade you. If you're good at making cakes, go hard at making cakes. If you're good at filling balloons, find a way to get compensated at filling balloons, whatever the case may be, right? You get the point. I'm not saying go out there and start up an 8-track tape company. Might not get too far that way.
Make it relevant. Well, you know,
I'm sure there's a market for that somewhere.
My husband makes vinyl records for a living, and you would think that wouldn't be, but vinyl has never slowed down, and that's what he does, and he does it very well. So yeah, maybe not 8-track tapes.
There it is.
Maybe not 8-track tapes, but there's, you know, vinyl records are like, it's not to say it's an old idea, it can't become new. So, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Something that I'd encourage individuals to do that's easy and simple, right? To kind of help you with this process. In the morning, write down the top 3 to 5 things that if you accomplish them today will make the biggest difference in your life. Not the top 3 to 5 things that will necessarily get you the most, that will result in a dollar bill being put in your account. That is important as entrepreneurs. Listen, not get it twisted. You must be profitable. But what are the top 3 to 5 things that will make the biggest difference in your life? That's a different question. Or the top 3 to 5 things will make the biggest difference in your business. That's a different question, right? Because in business and in life, what you're really trying to do is scale yourself. That's what you're trying to do. That's how you get over the hump. Scale. Mm-hmm. And the way you scale is, how do you find ways to increase your capacity to do something? In business, how do you increase your capacity to deliver a product or service? As a person, how do you increase your capacity to serve and be valuable and be happy? What are the 3 to 5 things you need to do to accomplish that goal? Because if you do those things, the money will come.
Yes.
All right.
Excellent.
I have a person that I work with, very good at earning money, does it with the best of them, right? I know something about that. I know what it's like to have a $30,000 day in business. I also know what it's like to have a $1 a month, right? But I know this person very good at earning money. Wakes up every single day, and it's like she has a synth brain. If there's an opportunity, she immediately figures out the value proposition, figures out how to position herself, and goals, and she needs to do it value, and the person wants it and be compensated to do that. But I've known this person for almost 20 years. And in that 20 years has never built capacity. So as a result, year in, year out, week in, week out, month in, month out, day in, day out, the work never gets easier. Right? That's why goal setting is important.
Yeah.
Because part of the goal setting process is asking yourself the important questions. How do I, what do I do to increase my capacity? So in the beginning in business, particularly for the new entrepreneurs, you're going to do a lot of things in the beginning that you don't get paid for. So later on, you can be compensated for things you no longer have to do. If you're not asking yourself those questions, you won't make that transition. You won't get over that hump, right? And that's also part of the goal setting process.
Absolutely. Well, there are so many tidbits to take away from this today. It's one of those that if you've watched it all the way through, I encourage you to sit with it and then come back to it. Come back to this and take other different things to help you start wherever you are in your process, because you may not be at the very beginning. You might be somewhere in the middle. You might need to refocus and reshift. So I'm so excited that this streamed on Facebook Live today. It actually worked, that it worked out. We are going to continue to keep showing up for the foreseeable future right now on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern time. If you have a topic or a suggestion or something that you're tired of Googling and getting crappy answers to, that's really, please let us know.
Yes.
Please give us feedback. Please share this with anyone you think that it might be helpful for. And yeah, we will talk to you all soon.